Hey, would you like a PDF of all the Old Soul, New Soul podcast episodes since we started the show? Well, it's under the Freebies tab on funastrology.com. Go grab yours now. Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. We are really keeping our eye on Jupiter these days. We talked about Jupiter in Gemini, and it still is here as we're recording this. We just had a Jupiter trine with Pluto. That was a nice, favorable aspect, at least a trine. And now we set our sights on something that we wanted to talk about because this is going to happen 3 times, twice in 2024, once in 2025. It really is now the big aspect on the table in astrology. Jupiter is applying to a square with Saturn, and I thought there would be nothing better than to hear Robert break this down for us. So, Robert, we have a chart up. It's in the show notes. Why don't you walk us through this?
All right. Well, this is August 19th when Jupiter exactly squares Saturn, but at the same time it does. Jupiter's conjunct Mars, and Jupiter's in Gemini. So Jupiter conjunct Mars is squaring a Saturn in Pisces, Venus in Virgo opposition. So this period of the month of August is a challenge for pretty much everything: your work, your occupation, relatives, siblings, relationships, money, and jobs, all of the above. And it's not bad. It's challenging, but it's not bad in the sense of negative, because 2 things. One is that it's Jupiter, which moves faster than Saturn. Jupiter is doing the moving here. And it's in an opening square to Saturn. If you mentally were to place Saturn in Pisces on the first cusp, then Gemini, so Jupiter in Gemini, would be in a 4th house position, a 4th house square to Saturn, which is an opening square. It's a new start. Now, Jupiter and Mars are in Gemini, the sign of siblings and relatives, in-laws. So there may be some, I don't want to say crises, although there could be crises, but there can be developments in your life in relation to brothers and sisters, cousins, aunts and uncles, in-laws, those sorts of things. And because Saturn, which is structure, and because Saturn is in Pisces, a transitional sign, everybody's life on the planet really is in a state of flux and fluctuation involving a person, their work, their money, their source of income. There's a lot of uncertainty. And this is going on globally and in economies, for example, but in personal lives too. The tendency naturally is to get very worried and frightened about the uncertainty of things or about the transition itself, because everybody's job and career, self-employed or working for other people, either one, are in this natural state, it's all very natural, of transitioning from what you've been doing and the way you've been doing it to doing something else or doing what you've been doing, but in a new way. And it's an opening square. So with Saturn in Pisces, if you think of the 2 fish tethered together, but swimming in opposite directions, one fish is facing backwards and the other one facing forwards. So it's a time to be concentrating not on trying to hang on to what seems to be leaving your life. And this can include things like losing a job or getting fired. Everybody can, oh, woe is me. Well, not necessarily. With this transit, losing a job or getting fired or the company closing down may turn out to be exactly the blessing in disguise that you need to get into something new, which you would not have done if you hadn't been fired or the company hadn't folded. So even in a situation like that, the 2 fish, one is swimming forward. So that's the fish to be concentrating on, the one that is embracing what's coming into your life, because this really is an opportunity cycle. Jupiter in this cycle, in this square, is conjoined Mars of action in Gemini. So contacts and communications and connections and networking are very important to get you successfully through this period of change and transition. You may want to get back in touch with siblings or relatives or cousins or aunts and uncles and so on that you've been estranged with. They themselves may be going through a transitional period or challenges of their own. And it would be a good period for you to try and reestablish connections with them, if nothing more than to let them know that you love them and that you understand and that you're there for them. So that's one thing. And in personal relationships, too, there can be communications difficulties, things that have been building up between live-in relationships or marriage relationships or even business partnerships that have been unspoken that you need to talk about on a really more constructive level, especially in business partnerships, but also in marriages. One or the other of the team, let's say marriage, may be changing careers, changing jobs, looking to get into something new. And this is a great time for them to do that. But that may be difficult to talk about, especially if children are involved, because that can lead to some temporary financial insecurities. But it's important to maintain communications. On the other hand, in any relationship, business or personal, even in those relationships, communications and new starts are what is really prime target for this square from Jupiter to Saturn this August. So that either you or a significant other may be wanting to find a new job or a new start. And this is really prime time to make that happen. So there can be meetings, correspondence, even legal papers and contracts that are involved in this. And because of this, people's schedules can be shifting, and probably permanently. It's also a great time to be looking for or implementing a second stream of income. So you may want to hang on to your day job, let's say, at the same time that you might want to start a secondary stream of income with your own business. And you can start small. It doesn't have to be any grandiose thing, but this is a great time to start a new self-employment business, if you will. It's also an excellent time to travel. It's an excellent time to start a website and build a clientele on the internet, for example, work remotely. So it's actually, to me, a very favorable square. And the most important element, I guess, to it is to realize that you need to communicate with each other, with your friends, your closest friends, with your partner in business or your partner in your romantic life or marital life, with your children, with your relatives. Stay in touch because things are changing. And if you don't communicate, then the changes can be upsetting and threatening to them. Whereas if you do communicate what you're thinking about doing and what you want to do, they're fine with it because they're included in the loop. So those are the things I think to remember.
You know, there's something else in this chart that I just saw here as I was looking at it. I tend to find yods or yods, as you say. There's a yod in here. And the top of the yod is the conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. And then one side of the base is Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. The other side of the yod is Pluto. Both of those at this time will be in retrograde. Pluto is sitting at 0 degrees Aquarius. I mean, these are just lit up points in the chart. So we have a T-square with Saturn and Venus at the base of that pyramid, and Jupiter-Mars. And Jupiter-Mars, I mean, there's talk about some fiery, powerful energy. You've got the king of the gods and the god of war right there at the top of that T-square, and you've got a yod. I mean, I look at this, yes, those are great characteristics from a personal standpoint, but as you said, and even as you said when we did the Jupiter-Uranus webinar in Taurus, that there are challenges. So there are some hurdles or obstacles to clear. But once you do, and I see that Pluto-Neptune yod as being incredibly powerful spiritually as well. It could be.
It is. It's also very powerful creatively, because if you look at the yod or the yod, you have the Sun and Mercury in Leo, which in that yod figures out to the Pluto-Neptune sextile. So creatively, if you have a creative hobby or a hobby that you want, or creative interest you want to turn into a business, terrific. For single people, it's also a very interesting relationship romantically this August. A meeting of minds, somebody that you really share a lot of mental and maybe artistic or metaphysical or creative interests together, but a real friend. And the idea of combining friendship and love is one of those rare things. If you happen to love somebody who is a friend, or if your love relationship that starts out as a sexually and romantic attractive one, and then you discover not only is that great, but you're also truly friends, that's what can make things last. It's also back to that T-square with Jupiter and Mars and Gemini, square Saturn and square Venus and Virgo. This is a great time for getting negative habits under control. Jupiter and Venus in square both rule excesses, excessive drinking, excessive sugar, excessive carbohydrates, lack of exercise, all those things. So that this T-square in August may bring some health conditions to the fore that you need to pay attention to. You may need to stop drinking alcohol. You may need to stop smoking marijuana. You may need to stop smoking cigarettes. You may need to stop eating so much sugar. You may need to start exercising. There's the Mars conjunct Jupiter. So it's a great period this August to get a handle or another handle on your health habits and implement a new program and a resolution to improve your health, because it's a great time to do that. You can do it under this kind of aspect, and it can become permanent.
Another thing about this first chart that we're looking at, August 19th, is that it happens two other times. It happens December 24th and June 15th. We'll put those charts up another time. But the fact that because of the retrogrades of both of these characters, both Saturn and Jupiter, it goes back and forth for a whole year. Now, that could have some shudder, I think.
Well, I'll tell you, with retrogrades, it's important to remember that any word that begins with re, R-E, applies to retrogrades. So say you're trying to quit smoking or drinking. Almost everybody who tries to quit those habits relapses. Get it? A reword. So you can expect to relapse, and then you have to once again resolve to stop it again. That's part of the process of eliminating bad habits. People that don't exercise and who start exercising may relapse and stop exercising during the repeat of this aspect. Fine, that's to be expected. Start it again. Just because you relapse doesn't mean that you have failed. It's just a test, and it's part of this very mutable Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius kind of thing. Starting, stopping, starting again. It's also about refining. So if you're starting a new secondary income or new self-employment, those three times that this aspect repeats are when you need to refine what you're doing, reorganize what you're doing, repair what you're doing, any reword. And that, too, is typical when you're starting a business. Most businesses are not an instant success. Doesn't happen. And many people get discouraged because they're impatient. And boy, is this ever an impatient aspect with Jupiter conjunct Mars and Gemini. And people use that for an excuse all the time. Well, I tried quitting drinking and it didn't work. Therefore, I'm going back to 12-pack a day. Crazy. They're impatient. They're unrealistic in terms of their expectations. So the impatience in through here. So be patient with yourself, but be resolved, and be willing to refine and renew and revise and so on your plan, your business plan, your personal plan, your habits plan. So the setbacks are fine, but they're natural kind of turning points on the way to progress and to success, because ultimately this combination of Jupiter and Mars and Saturn and Venus ultimately can be indicative. It's challenging, yes, but ultimately it's indicative of success. You don't get success without hard aspects. Hate to tell you, but hard aspects correspond with ambitions. Yes, they're frustrating, and they're meant to be, because you're meant to feel the frustration so that you are motivated to overcome the frustration. So if you start a business online, you're not getting enough clients, it's frustrating. Figure out why you are not and revise what you're doing. So you may have to revise these plans for getting ahead 3 times when this Jupiter-Saturn square repeats. But don't give up the goal. And that's going to be the tendency with a lot of people, is to quit too soon. The ones that succeed and they constantly refine and revise what they're doing during these 3 passes with Jupiter squaring Saturn, they're the ones that will succeed.
Okay, I love that. So it's taking a long game approach to this then.
Yes.
This is basically a year-long back and forth. So if we just think Saturn is one of the key players here, Saturn is about delays, then we just slow down, dig in, take a year-long perspective, and realize that we're going to be working through things over the course of a full year. Is that a good summary?
It is, but let me add one other thing, and it's with this particular aspect. Anytime you're trying to make a major change in your life, whether it's changing job directions or starting your own business or stopping a habit like drinking or smoking or losing weight, any of those changes, if you're in a relationship, and even if you're not, even just friendships, some of those relationships inevitably will try and undermine you. Not consciously, but they will try and undermine you. Because if you're changing in a major way, it's threatening to them. Totally unconscious, but you need to be aware of it, because loved ones, so-called, can undermine your, for example, if you're in a relationship and both of you are drinkers and one of you decides to get sober, there are only a couple of scenarios. Either your partner is also going to get sober, or you are going to go back to drinking, or the relationship will break up. It's that simple. So you need to be aware. And in friendships, you may find, if you start a business, that even your closest friends, are you kidding? What makes you think you can start a business? You don't have time. You're not making enough money at the business. They start undermining you. So you need to be prepared for that. And you can deal with it in positive ways, but you need to be on the lookout for that. Because with Venus opposite Saturn, especially in this one in August, be prepared for some unconscious resistance from the people that you thought you could trust. And there may, in fact, be issues of trust involved in some of this T-square. And this can involve people you work with, friends, business partners, or marriage partners, live-in loves, issues of trust. Saturn in Pisces, opposite Venus in Virgo. Largely, it can also just be an issue of miscommunications, but there can be issues of trust. And in some relationships, it's not that the trust will be broken so much as that the relationship itself may have outlived its usefulness for one or both parties, and you're moving on. In some situations, it literally will be mistrust. But again, that's usually a lack of communication. If the relationship has gone stale for one partner and they want to move on, but they don't know how to tell you, then they may cheat, and they'll make sure that you find out. That way it'll bring it to the fore. It's much better and healthier to say, I don't know that I'm into this anymore. Let's have a discussion. So just be aware of, these are also very subtle elements, but the point is, you're really moving away. The 2 fish, remember, in Pisces, one fish is facing the past. That's going away. The other fish is facing forward and trying to embrace what's new and coming in. As long as you can keep honest communications going on, you'll be fine.
All right, excellent. And, one of my favorite sayings is live your highest timeline. And you talk about in here a lot, be living the conscious life. And this episode, I think, was one that you might want to go back and listen to a couple of times over the next year, because there's a lot of high timeline strategies in here that he just outlined. Great. Thank you, Robert. And if you'd like to get in touch with him about taking a look at your own chart, you know that his link is in the show notes always, as is everything else that we have going on here. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock.